She was sold to a silent rancher, and wept when he chose kindness on their wedding night. The sun was low in the sky when the wagon rolled slowly along the dusty path, the wheels creaking under the weight of the journey. She sat on the wooden bench inside, clutching her thin shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her heart raced with every turn of the wheel. She had traveled far from her home, far from everything she had ever known, and now she was being brought to a place that felt more like a cage than a new life. She kept her eyes on the horizon, though the landscape offered little comfort. Endless fields stretched out in every direction, dotted with sparse trees and the occasional distant hill. The air smelled of dry earth and animals, unfamiliar and strange. Her stomach churned with a mix of fear and uncertainty. She didn't know what awaited her at the end of this long journey, only that she had no choice but to face it. The wagon slowed as it approached the ranch. A tall, silent man stood near the gate, his posture stiff but calm. He had a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, making it hard to read his expression. He didn't speak, only nodded once as the driver guided the wagon toward him. She felt her heart tighten at the sight. Rumors about this man had reached her ears long before she arrived. They said he was strict, quiet, and unyielding. Some whispered that he was cold and unkind, a man who did not easily show warmth or understanding. She tried not to dwell on the words, but fear clung to her like a heavy cloak. She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. She had come this far. There was no turning back. The wagon rumbled over the uneven ground as it entered the main yard of the ranch. The buildings were simple but sturdy, made of weathered wood that had withstood years of sun, wind, and rain. The scent of hay, horses, and earth mixed together, filling her senses with something raw and real. She had never been on a ranch before. Everything was vast, the open fields, the barns, the corrals where horses grazed. The silence of the place was almost overwhelming, broken only by the occasional clatter of hooves or the distant call of a bird. She felt small, almost invisible in the vastness of it all. The rancher stepped forward, his boots crunching against the gravel. He did not speak, only looked at her with steady, unreadable eyes. His presence was imposing, yet there was a calmness about him that made her heart pound even faster. He moved with a quiet confidence, a man who understood the land and the life he had built on it. She wondered what he thought of her. Did he see fear in her eyes? Did he see the uncertainty she carried in her small, trembling frame? She tried to stand a little straighter to make herself appear less fragile, but her hands shook as she adjusted the shawl around her shoulders. The driver opened the wagon door and she stepped down carefully, her boots crunching on the gravel. The rancher extended a hand, not to touch, but to guide her gently toward the main house. She felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. There was no harshness in his gesture, no sign of impatience. Still, she couldn't shake the fear that had settled deep in her chest. Her eyes darted around, taking in the details of her new surroundings. The main house was simple but solid, with a large porch that stretched along the front. Windows reflected the fading light, giving the building a warm, golden glow despite the chill in the evening air. She noticed the other people on the ranch, workers moving quietly, tending to animals or preparing for the night. Their faces were neutral, polite but distant. She felt a pang of loneliness, realizing that she was entirely alone in this new world. No one from her past had come with her. No familiar voices, no comforting touch, only strangers in a vast, unfamiliar place. Her mind wandered back to her home, to the narrow streets, the familiar faces, the smells of food and wood smoke. She missed it all terribly, and yet she could not go back. She had no choice but to step forward and face this new life. The rancher led her to a small room near the main house. It was modest, with a simple bed, a wooden chest, and a window that looked out over the fields. The walls were plain but clean, and the air smelled faintly of fresh linen and wood polish. She let out a small sigh, grateful for the quiet safety of the room, though the fear had not entirely left her. He did not speak. He simply gave her a nod and left, closing the door softly behind him. She was alone, left to her thoughts, and yet something about the gesture, so simple, so unassuming, brought a flicker of relief. Perhaps he was not as harsh as she had feared. She walked to the window and looked out over the ranch. The sun was dipping below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The land stretched endlessly before her, filled with possibilities she could not yet imagine. She could hear the low calls of horses, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, and the faint sound of water from a nearby stream. It was peaceful, yet intimidating in its vastness. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, imagining herself wandering freely across the fields, though she knew that freedom was not hers, not yet. That night she lay in bed, unable to sleep. The room was quiet, almost too quiet, and every creak of the floorboards or rustle of the wind made her startle. She thought of the rancher and wondered what he expected of her. Was he kind? Was he strict? Would he accept her as she was, or would she always feel like an intruder in this new world? The fear in her chest made it hard to breathe, yet there was a small, growing curiosity about the man who had brought her here. His silence was not empty. It seemed deliberate, controlled, almost like he was measuring her carefully, watching her responses, trying to understand her before speaking. The days that followed were a mixture of routine and uncertainty. She learned to move quietly around the ranch, observing the animals, the workers, and the land itself. She noticed the rancher more each day, watching how he moved with purpose and care. He worked with the animals, repaired fences, and managed the land with a steady, deliberate pace. Though he did not speak to her much, she could feel his eyes on her at times, assessing, considering, and perhaps even protecting. It was a strange comfort, knowing that someone so strong was aware of her presence and, in some silent way, responsible for her safety. She began to realize that life on the ranch was not just about obedience or fear. It was about understanding, adapting, and learning the rhythms of the land. Every day brought new challenges and discoveries. She learned how to carry water, feed the animals, and even ride the horses under careful supervision. Each small success gave her a sense of accomplishment, a feeling she had not experienced in a long time. She was still afraid, yes, but she was also beginning to understand that this life, though difficult, could offer more than she had imagined. It could offer safety, routine, and perhaps someday a sense of belonging. As the sun rose and set over the vast fields, she found herself thinking less about what she had lost and more about what she could gain. The rancher remained a silent figure in her life, observing, guiding, and protecting without words. There was a quiet strength in him that spoke louder than any conversation could. And though she did not yet know his heart, she began to sense that beneath the silence, there was something good, something steady, something capable of kindness. It was a small hope, fragile and uncertain, but it was enough to keep her moving forward, one day at a time, across the wide and lonely ranch that was now her home. The morning air was crisp and quiet, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth across the ranch. She woke early, as she had been doing each day, to the soft light spilling through the window. The world outside looked calm and peaceful, yet her heart felt restless. She knew that each day on this ranch would test her patience, her courage, and her willingness to adapt. She dressed slowly, making sure to keep her movements deliberate and careful. Every action felt important because she was learning how to move in a place where she was still a stranger, a newcomer in a world that belonged to others. When she stepped outside, the ranch was already alive with quiet activity. The rancher had been awake long before her. She saw him in the distance, moving among the horses, adjusting a fence post, his hands strong and sure. His silent presence was imposing, yet strangely reassuring. He did not look her way, but she knew he had already noticed her. She kept her eyes down, careful not to draw attention, but in truth, she wanted him to see her, not with judgment, but perhaps with some understanding. She made her way to the barn, where the morning chores were beginning. The smell of hay, leather, and animals filled the space, grounding her in the reality of the ranch. There were other workers, moving with quiet efficiency, but she kept to herself, unsure how to join in or what her responsibilities should be. Every step she took was cautious, her mind filled with thoughts about making a good impression, about learning quickly enough to avoid mistakes, about finding a place in this strange, wide world. The rancher approached her then, his long shadow stretching across the barn floor. He carried a bucket of water for the horses, and without a word, he handed it to her. She startled at the gesture, unsure if she was expected to refuse or accept. When she looked into his eyes, she found nothing but steady calm, a patience that seemed endless. Taking the bucket, she followed him to the horses, feeling a small warmth in her chest. He did not speak, yet the gesture was filled with meaning. He was teaching her without words, showing her how to do the work, guiding her hand when she struggled to lift the heavy bucket, and offering silent encouragement when she succeeded. The morning passed in a quiet rhythm. She fed the horses, swept the stable, and carried water to the smaller animals in the yard. Each task was new and unfamiliar, but she learned quickly, driven by both fear and curiosity. The rancher watched her from time to time, never hovering, never criticizing, only observing. When she made a mistake, spilling some water or dropping a bit of hay, he did not scold. Instead, he simply demonstrated how to do it correctly, his movements precise and calm. She noticed the small ways he cared for the animals, checking their hooves, adjusting their blankets, speaking softly to them even when no one else was around. It made her realize that his silence was not coldness but thoughtfulness. He did not waste words, he showed care in action. During the afternoon, she was assigned to help repair a section of the fence near the edge of the property. The sun beat down on them and the work was tiring, but the rancher stayed close, offering guidance whenever she seemed unsure. At one point, she struggled to lift a heavy piece of wood. He stepped forward, placing a hand on it without a word, sharing the weight with her. She looked up, her face flushed from effort and the heat, and caught a brief, almost imperceptible nod. She felt a flicker of connection, a silent reassurance that she was not alone, that he would not let her fail or be harmed. As the day went on, she began to notice other things about him. The way he treated the workers, always with respect and fairness, even though he rarely spoke. The way he noticed small details, the way a horse favored one leg, the way the water trough needed refilling before it ran dry. She realized that he paid attention, that he cared deeply, even if he did not express it in words. Slowly, she began to let go of some of her fear, allowing herself to believe that perhaps he could be trusted, that perhaps this place could become something more than a prison. Evening arrived with a soft glow that painted the fields in shades of gold and pink. She paused to rest, sitting on a fence post and looking out over the land. The rancher approached, carrying a lantern, its warm light casting long shadows. He did not speak, only handed her a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. She accepted it, grateful, and noticed a faint softness in his eyes as he looked at her. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words felt awkward and heavy. Instead, she nodded, and he nodded back. That simple exchange felt like the beginning of understanding, a silent bridge forming between two people who had known only distance and caution. Night fell, and the ranch was quiet again, save for the distant calls of animals settling for sleep. She retreated to her room, carrying with her a small sense of accomplishment and hope. For the first time since arriving, she felt a little less afraid. She realized that life on the ranch was not just about survival. It was about learning, adapting, and finding a place where she could exist without constant fear. She thought about the rancher, about the silent ways he had guided her through the day. She began to see that there was a kindness in him, subtle but real, a kindness that did not demand anything in return, a kindness that might in time be the foundation of trust. Over the following days, a routine settled into her life. Each morning she rose early, each day bringing new lessons. She learned the rhythms of the land, the habits of the animals, and the expectations of the work. Each task, though simple, felt significant. She discovered that even small successes, a well-fed horse, a neatly stacked pile of hay, a repaired fence, brought a sense of pride and belonging. The rancher continued to guide her silently, offering help when needed but allowing her space to learn. His quiet observation was steady, comforting, and gradually, she began to feel less like a stranger and more like someone who could exist in this world. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, a sudden challenge arose. A young foal had become tangled in a fence, struggling to free itself. She froze, unsure what to do, fear gripping her heart. The rancher moved swiftly but gently, freeing the animal with practiced hands. He handed the foal to her, showing her how to calm it, how to ensure it did not panic again. She followed his guidance carefully, her hands trembling at first but growing steadier. When the foal was finally safe and calm, she looked at him, and for the first time their eyes met in a shared understanding. No words were spoken, but the connection was undeniable. Trust was beginning to grow, built not on promises or speeches, but on shared experience, patience, and care. Evenings became a time for quiet reflection. She would sit by the window, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly above the fields. She thought about her past, about the fear and uncertainty that had brought her here, and about the small glimmers of hope she now felt. The rancher remained largely silent, but his presence was constant and reassuring. She began to understand that kindness did not always need words. that actions could speak more clearly than any sentence ever could. And with each passing day, she felt the walls around her heart begin to soften, allowing her to hope that perhaps this life, though unexpected and strange, could offer something she had never imagined, a place where she was safe, a place where she could belong. Days on the ranch had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm, yet each one brought new lessons and challenges. She woke early that morning, the light of dawn spilling over the hills and painting the fields in gentle shades of gold. The air was crisp and smelled of dew and earth. She stretched, feeling the ache in her muscles from the work of the previous day. Her body was growing stronger, more accustomed to the long hours and the physical demands of ranch life. She dressed quickly, her hands moving almost automatically, and stepped outside. The world was still and calm, yet alive with possibility. The rancher was already at work, moving between the animals with precise care. He noticed her approach and gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that she had arrived. She returned it, feeling a sense of comfort in the routine. His presence, steady and calm, had begun to feel like a kind of anchor. Even without words, he had become a quiet guide in her new life, someone whose actions spoke louder than speech ever could. She watched as he tended to a mare in the corral, checking her hooves and brushing her coat with gentle hands. There was a quiet authority in the way he moved, a balance of strength and care that inspired both respect and reassurance. Her tasks for the morning were clear. She needed to feed the animals, gather eggs from the chickens, and help repair a section of the barn roof that had been damaged during a recent storm. As she worked, she noticed the rancher watching her from time to time, his gaze calm and attentive. He did not interrupt or interfere unless it was necessary, but his presence alone gave her confidence. She began to realize that trust was not built through words alone. It was shown through consistency, care, and quiet attention. By mid-morning, a challenge arose that would test both her skills and the growing bond between them. A young colt, playful and energetic, had wandered too close to the edge of a steep embankment. It stumbled and became frightened, whinnying loudly. She froze for a moment, fear rising in her chest, unsure how to help. The rancher moved immediately, but with a calmness that steadied her own trembling hands. He approached the colt slowly, speaking in soft tones to soothe it. She watched carefully, absorbing his movements and the way he used his presence to calm the animal. Then he gestured for her to help, showing her how to hold the colt gently, how to support it without startling it further. Her hands shook as she followed his guidance, but slowly, step by step, they managed to lead the colt to safety. She felt her heart pounding, not just from fear, but from the realization that she had succeeded. When she looked at the rancher, he gave her a brief, approving nod. No words were spoken, yet she understood the meaning clearly. She had proven to herself, and perhaps to him, that she was capable, that she could face challenges and emerge stronger. For the first time, she felt a genuine sense of accomplishment, a feeling that had been absent since she arrived at the ranch. The afternoon brought a different kind of lesson. She was asked to help with mending a fence along the edge of the property. The sun was high, warm, and bright, and the work was physically demanding. As she hammered posts and secured rails, the rancher worked nearby, guiding her through the techniques she had yet to master. He corrected her posture gently, demonstrated the proper way to handle the tools, and offered silent encouragement through his attentive gaze. She realized that his guidance was patient and deliberate, never rushed or harsh. Each small success, each nail driven correctly, each rail secured firmly, brought a sense of pride and a growing respect for the man who had silently become her teacher. As the day wore on, she began to notice more of the rancher's subtle kindnesses. He brought her water when she was thirsty, adjusted the blanket of a tired horse without her asking, and left small offerings of food in her room when she returned from the fields. These gestures, quiet and unassuming, spoke volumes. She began to understand that he was not the harsh, unfeeling man she had feared. Instead, he was someone who showed care through actions rather than words, someone whose patience and thoughtfulness created a sense of safety and stability. By evening, a gentle wind swept across the fields, carrying the scents of grass and earth. She paused to rest on a large rock near the barn, wiping sweat from her brow and taking in the view. The ranch stretched out endlessly before her, a tapestry of fields, barns, and pastures, with hills rising in the distance. The rancher approached silently, holding a lantern that cast a warm glow across the ground. He did not speak, only offered her a small piece of bread and a nod. She accepted it, feeling a surge of gratitude and relief. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a profound message. She was seen, she was acknowledged, and she was cared for. Night fell and the ranch became quiet once more. She returned to her room, reflecting on the events of the day. The colt, the fence, the quiet guidance of the rancher, all of it had taught her something important. Trust was not given lightly, but it could grow slowly, nurtured through consistent care and shared experiences. She realized that she had begun to rely on him, not out of fear or obligation, but because his presence offered a sense of security she had not felt in a long time. Over the next few days, this sense of trust deepened. She learned more about the routines of the ranch, the habits of the animals, and the way the land needed constant care. She observed the rancher closely, noting how he balanced work with quiet reflection, how he treated every living creature with respect, and how he seemed to understand the rhythms of the world in a way she had never experienced. In turn, he began to notice her efforts, the way she learned quickly, the care she showed for the animals, and the determination she displayed even when the work was hard. Though he still spoke rarely, his approval was evident in small gestures. A nod, a brief glance of acknowledgement, a hand extended in guidance. One afternoon, a small emergency tested their trust further. A young calf had wandered away from the herd and become stuck near a muddy stream. She hesitated, unsure of how to help, but the rancher approached calmly, showing her step by step how to guide the calf back safely. She followed his instructions carefully, her heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. Together, they managed to free the calf and return it to the herd. When it was safe, she looked at him, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of connection. His eyes held a quiet pride, not in a commanding way, but in acknowledgement of her courage and effort. She felt seen, valued, and respected, and it was a feeling she had never experienced before. Evenings became moments of reflection. She would sit by the window, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly across the sky. The rancher often remained nearby, working quietly or simply observing the land. Though they rarely spoke, a silent understanding had begun to form between them. She felt a growing sense of comfort in his presence, a realization that he was not the distant, unfeeling man she had feared. Instead, he was someone who cared deeply, who offered kindness without demanding it, and who understood that trust was built slowly, through shared experience and consistent care. As the days turned into weeks, she found herself growing stronger, both in body and spirit. She had learned to navigate the challenges of the ranch, to care for the animals, and to contribute meaningfully to the daily work. More importantly, she had begun to trust the rancher, to see him not as a figure of fear, but as a guide and protector. The fear that had accompanied her arrival began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope and a sense of possibility. She realized that even in the most unexpected and uncertain circumstances, kindness and patience could create a foundation for trust and understanding. By the end of Part 3, she felt a quiet but profound shift within herself. The rancher's silent guidance, his gentle gestures, and the shared experiences of the day-to-day life on the ranch had begun to build a bond that neither words nor time could easily undo. She no longer saw the ranch as a place of fear, but as a place of learning, growth, and emerging hope. The once intimidating figure of the silent rancher had become a steady presence in her life, someone whose actions spoke louder than any words ever could. And in that silent understanding, she began to feel that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a place where she could belong. The morning of the wedding arrived with a calm, gentle sunlight spilling across the ranch. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the scents of grass, earth, and the faint warmth of wood smoke from the main house. She woke early, her heart fluttering with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Today was a day she had imagined in quiet dreams, yet never fully believed would come. The rancher's presence had always been steady and silent, but today she sensed something different, a subtle tension in the way he moved, a careful attention in his gaze. Though he said nothing, she felt that he understood the importance of this day, that he shared her quiet apprehension. She dressed slowly, choosing a simple gown that had been prepared for her. It was modest, clean, and comfortable, yet the folds of fabric carried a quiet dignity. She smoothed the cloth over her shoulders and down her arms, feeling the unfamiliar sensation of being seen in a way she had never experienced before. The gown symbolized a new beginning, a chance to step into a life that, while uncertain, held hope and possibility. She took a deep breath and went to the mirror, staring at her reflection. The girl she saw was still timid, still fragile in many ways, yet there was a quiet strength in her eyes, a strength born from the challenges she had faced and the small victories she had won on the ranch. The rancher approached quietly, standing near the doorway without a word. His wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but she could see the faint lines of concentration around his eyes. He was as silent as always, yet there was a calm assurance in his presence that settled her nerves. She had come to understand his silence, to appreciate the way it allowed him to express care without unnecessary words. Today, however, the weight of the day seemed to press on them both, and though he did not speak, she sensed that he felt it too. The ceremony itself was simple and quiet, held in a small clearing near the barn. The sun filtered through the leaves of nearby trees, casting dappled patterns on the ground. The ranch workers gathered around, their faces filled with gentle smiles and quiet respect. There were no grand decorations or elaborate arrangements, only the natural beauty of the land and the people who had become part of her new life. She walked slowly to the center of the clearing, each step feeling heavy and light at the same time, carrying the weight of her past and the promise of a future she had yet to fully understand. The rancher stood waiting, his posture steady and calm. She noticed the faint lines of care around his eyes, the way his hands rested lightly at his sides. Though he had always been silent, she felt his gaze on her, steady and reassuring. She felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of fear, relief, and hope. This was the moment she had both dreaded and longed for, and yet, as she looked into his eyes, she realized that he was not the man she had feared. His presence, quiet and strong, spoke of patience, respect, and a deep understanding that she had never known before. The words of the ceremony were few, spoken softly by a friend who had agreed to guide them through this simple union. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for his, and he offered his hand without hesitation. When their fingers touched, she felt a strange warmth spread through her, a quiet reassurance that she was no longer alone. The rancher's touch was gentle, careful, and deliberate, a silent promise that he would not hurt her, that he would protect her in ways both seen and unseen. She felt tears welling in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief and gratitude. As the ceremony concluded, they returned to the main house, where the rancher led her gently to her room. She had imagined this moment countless times in her mind, but nothing had prepared her for the calm dignity he displayed. He did not rush her, nor did he assert any authority beyond the quiet respect he had always shown. He guided her to a chair near the window and stood nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. She could feel her heart racing, unsure of what to expect, yet ready to face whatever came, knowing that he would act with care and kindness. He finally spoke a few quiet words, the first in many days that felt intentional and meaningful. "You are safe here," he said simply, his voice low but steady. Those words, though few, carried more weight than any grand speech could. She felt a deep sense of relief, realizing that the fears she had carried for so long were beginning to fade. The rancher's kindness, shown in countless small gestures over the weeks, had culminated in this moment of quiet assurance. She no longer needed to imagine cruelty or harshness. She could feel the truth of his character in the way he stood, in the way he moved, and in the gentle tone of his voice. That evening, they shared a simple meal, prepared with care and served with quiet attentiveness. The rancher did not speak much, but he offered her space, encouragement, and subtle gestures of kindness. He asked her gently about her day, about her thoughts, and about how she was feeling. Each question was posed with care, never demanding, never harsh. She realized that this was a man who valued respect, who understood that true connection was built on trust, patience, and gentle guidance. She felt her tears rise again, not of fear, but of gratitude for the quiet compassion he had shown her. After the meal, they stepped outside to walk among the fields under the soft light of the moon. The ranch was quiet, bathed in silver light, the stars stretching endlessly above. She walked beside him, feeling the strength and steadiness of his presence. She realized that trust had grown slowly, quietly, through days of shared work, moments of guidance and gestures of care. She had come to understand that kindness was not always loud or obvious. It could be quiet, steady, and unwavering, the foundation for a bond that required patience and understanding. As they returned to the main house, the rancher guided her to her room once more. He did not rush, did not impose, but offered reassurance in the form of calm presence and gentle gestures. She felt tears streaming down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the realization that she was not only safe, but valued and respected. His choice to act with kindness, to honor her feelings and her dignity, brought a profound sense of relief and joy. She wept quietly, releasing the fears and anxieties that had weighed on her for so long. The rancher remained nearby, standing silently as she allowed herself to feel the depth of the moment. He did not speak over her tears, did not attempt to control her emotions. Instead, he offered patience, understanding, and a steady presence that allowed her to process her emotions fully. She realized that this quiet care, this unwavering respect, was a gift more precious than anything else she had encountered. It was a demonstration of true kindness, a quiet promise that she would be treated with dignity and compassion in the days and years to come. By the time she had composed herself, she felt a profound sense of calm. The rancher's silent support, his deliberate patience, and his consistent kindness had transformed what she had feared into a moment of safety, respect, and hope. She no longer felt like a stranger in this world, but like someone who belonged, who could face each day with courage and trust. The rancher, too, seemed to recognize the significance of the night, his quiet gestures confirming that he understood the importance of treating her with care and compassion. That night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she arrived at the ranch, fearful and uncertain, to the quiet trust that had developed through shared work and guidance, to the profound relief and gratitude she felt now, she recognized the depth of the transformation. The rancher's kindness had changed everything. She understood that trust and respect could grow even in the most unexpected circumstances, and that compassion could heal fears long held in silence. For the first time, she felt a quiet hope that life on the ranch could be more than survival. It could be a place of learning, growth, and emotional safety. The man who had once seemed distant and unyielding had become a figure of protection and care. His silence had never been emptiness. It had been deliberate, a way of showing thoughtfulness, respect, and strength. And in that quiet understanding, she had found the beginnings of a bond built not on fear or obligation, but on genuine care, trust, and kindness. As the moonlight filtered through her window, she drifted to sleep with a sense of peace she had never known. The journey had been long and filled with uncertainty, yet it had led her to a place of safety and hope. The rancher remained a silent guardian, his quiet actions having spoken more than words ever could. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities for trust and connection. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, to feel the warmth of safety, and to embrace the profound kindness that had transformed her world. The days after the wedding were filled with a quiet rhythm that felt different from anything she had known before. The ranch was the same wide expanse of fields, barns, and pastures, yet it seemed to carry a softer tone now, a sense of belonging that she had not felt when she first arrived. The rancher moved among the animals and the land as he always had, steady and silent, but now she noticed subtle gestures that spoke volumes, small acts of care that showed he had accepted her as part of this life, part of this world. She began to understand that trust and connection were built not through grand gestures, but through consistent, thoughtful actions repeated day after day. She awoke each morning with a renewed sense of purpose. No longer consumed by fear or uncertainty, she approached her daily chores with a confidence that had grown steadily over the weeks. Feeding the animals, gathering eggs, mending fences, and caring for the fields were no longer just tasks she performed out of obligation. They had become a way of feeling connected to the land, to the rancher, and to the life she was building. Each success, no matter how small, brought a sense of pride and accomplishment that reinforced her growing sense of belonging. The rancher continued to watch her quietly, always present but never intrusive. Sometimes, when she struggled with a heavy task or an unfamiliar technique, he would step in, demonstrating the correct method or offering a guiding hand. Other times, he simply observed, allowing her to find her own way. This balance of support and freedom created a sense of partnership that she had never experienced before. She realized that he respected her abilities, that he valued her independence, and that his quiet care had been a foundation for her trust. Slowly, she began to feel not only safe, but also capable and valued. One morning, she accompanied him to the far edge of the property to check on a young herd of cows that had been moved to a new pasture. The sun was bright, and a gentle breeze rustled through the grass. The rancher worked with deliberate care, checking each animal for signs of discomfort or injury. She followed his example, learning to notice the small details. The way a cow shifted its weight, the way the grass looked when it had been grazed too short, the subtle signs that indicated health and well-being. With each passing moment, she felt more competent, more attuned to the rhythms of the ranch, and more connected to the man who had guided her patiently through these lessons. In the afternoons, she would sometimes help with tasks that required teamwork, such as moving hay or guiding horses into the corral. These moments allowed her to see the rancher in a different light, not as a distant figure, but as someone who could work alongside her, quietly coordinating and supporting without words. She admired his skill and calm authority, the way he moved with confidence and precision. At the same time, she recognized that he trusted her, allowing her to take initiative and make decisions within the tasks at hand. This mutual respect became the foundation for a deeper connection, one built on understanding, competence, and shared experience. Evenings were a time for reflection and quiet companionship. She would often sit on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. The rancher would join her at times, carrying a lantern or a simple chair, sitting nearby in comfortable silence. They did not need words to communicate. Their presence alone was enough. In those moments, she felt a profound sense of peace, a reassurance that she was not alone, and that she had found a place where she was safe, valued, and respected. The fear that had once defined her existence was slowly replaced by trust, hope, and a sense of home. Over time, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. The anxiety that had once gripped her chest upon waking was replaced by a quiet confidence. The trembling hands and hesitant steps that had marked her first days on the ranch were replaced by sure movements and decisive action. She discovered that she was stronger than she had ever known, capable of adapting, learning, and thriving in a world that had once seemed intimidating and distant. Each day brought small victories, each evening a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. The rancher, too, demonstrated his care in quiet ways that spoke more than words ever could. He repaired broken tools before she noticed they were damaged, left food and water where she could easily reach them, and occasionally left small notes or gestures that showed he thought of her needs. He did not command or demand, he guided and supported. She realized that his silence had always been intentional, a way of showing thoughtfulness, patience, and respect. In this steady, consistent care, she felt a deepening trust that went beyond simple comfort. It was a connection rooted in understanding, respect, and shared experience. One afternoon, a small incident reminded her of how far she had come. A young foal had wandered too close to the edge of a stream, and she moved quickly to guide it back to safety. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, and her movements confident. The rancher watched, a faint smile breaking through his usual stoicism as he observed her competence. She realized that she had grown not only in skill, but in courage and self-assurance. The journey from fear to trust, from uncertainty to capability, had been long and challenging, yet she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. As the seasons changed, so too did the rhythm of life on the ranch. She learned to anticipate the needs of the animals, to work efficiently alongside the rancher, and to contribute meaningfully to the daily life of the property. The vast fields no longer felt intimidating. They felt alive, full of opportunities for growth, learning, and connection. The rancher's quiet guidance continued, each gesture reinforcing the lessons of patience, care, and kindness. She had come to understand that he was not only her protector, but also a partner in the shared work and responsibilities of the ranch. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection, sometimes together on the porch, sometimes alone in her room, watching the stars stretch endlessly above the fields. She thought about her journey, the fear and uncertainty of her first days, the small lessons and shared challenges, and the profound relief and gratitude she had felt on her wedding night. She realized that she had grown stronger, braver, and more capable, not just because of her own efforts, but because of the patience, kindness, and guidance of the rancher. In his quiet presence, she had found a sense of security and belonging that had once seemed impossible. One night, as they walked together through the fields under a clear sky, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they were building together. The rancher did not speak, but his steady presence and gentle gestures spoke volumes. He adjusted a blanket on a horse, guided her around a muddy patch, and offered a reassuring nod when she successfully completed a task. In these small moments, she felt the culmination of weeks and months of trust, patience, and mutual respect. She understood that true connection was built gradually, through shared experiences, consistent care, and the willingness to support one another quietly and thoughtfully. The seasons continued to pass, and life on the ranch settled into a harmonious rhythm. She no longer felt like a stranger or an outsider. She had grown into her role, gaining confidence, skill, and a sense of belonging. The rancher's quiet care and deliberate guidance had shown her the power of kindness, patience, and respect. In return, she had learned to trust, to act with confidence, and to contribute meaningfully to their shared life. The bond they had formed was strong, grounded in understanding and shared experience, a connection that would endure through the challenges and joys of life on the ranch. By the end of Part 5, she felt a profound sense of peace and hope. The journey from fear and uncertainty to trust and belonging had been long, yet it had brought her to a place of safety, dignity, and growth. The rancher's consistent kindness and quiet guidance had transformed her world, showing her that even in unexpected circumstances, trust and connection could flourish. She had found not only a home, but also a sense of purpose and identity, and in the steady, patient care of the rancher, she had discovered the true meaning of safety, respect, and belonging. In the quiet moments before sleep, she would sometimes reflect on her journey. She remembered the fear that had accompanied her arrival, the small victories that had built her confidence, and the moments of quiet guidance that had nurtured her trust. She realized that the rancher's kindness had been the key to her transformation, a steady force that had helped her grow, heal, and thrive. And in the peaceful, quiet nights on the ranch, she allowed herself to feel hope for the future, a future filled with possibility, companionship, and the enduring strength of trust and care.